Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Decca and I'm a merch designer and illustrator based in Texas. This is the first time I'm doing a video like this as far as the voiceover content, and hopefully next time I have a better idea of how to approach this sort of thing, but recently there's been something that I've wanted to talk about and I figured what better time than now when I'm con crunching and talking over footage that's related to the topic of this video. As you may have guessed, I'm an artist alley vendor, and when you do table at multiple events, you'll eventually start to notice the way people will look at your booth and products. I don't take it personally if someone glances at my table and leaves because my art style isn't for everyone, and I do cater to a very specific niche, that being sports anime fans. Of course, I do have other stuff at my table, but the sports manga stuff is definitely the majority of my booth, and I've been labeled as the Haikyuu table at multiple events, even though my favorite sports manga is Slam Dunk. It's actually Haikyuu that kind of sparked my want to address something that I've noticed a lot surrounding the discussion around sports manga, namely shipping culture and its relation to sports series. For a little background, I'm somebody that's been consuming sports series since I started getting into anime and manga as a little kid. But the sports series that I found myself mostly drawn towards were Slam Dunk because I grew up in a basketball household, and stuff like Ofuri and Initial D, which I am counting as a sports manga. Even during the huge boom of sports anime around 2013, 2015 maybe, I primarily stuck with titles like Diano Ace and Black Box, not to be confused with Blue Box, and I wasn't that keen on a lot of the more popular titles at the time, but more on that later. I will say though that I basically ignored Haikyuu during its peak because I wasn't the hugest fan of volleyball as a sport, but for full transparency, I did binge it last year so I could watch the movie with context, and then after that my friend trapped me in a room every day until I finished the manga as well. So I've only relatively recently entered my Haikyuu phase, but I did go kind of crazy with the merch last year, and obviously I'm still really into the series. Anyway, I'm a huge sports fan in general, and I've consumed a wide variety of sports manga from the well-known titles to the lesser-known titles, and I even enjoy watching actual sports since I'm too short to continue playing them. All of this is to say that, I think I have the credentials to discuss this sort of thing. Not that you really need credentials to talk about whatever you want online, but because I was so familiar with sports anime and manga, it made me very aware of the difference in how people perceive certain sports series. In particular, I started noticing a kind of misogynistic trend in how people perceive certain sports manga, and I feel like it kind of reflects a very common attitude that you'll find in Animanga fandom as a whole. Before talking about sports series as they impact modern day, let's discuss its beginnings and how they impact real life. Sports manga have been a pillar of the manga industry since its beginnings, and many narrative tropes that you see in action manga, such as protagonists undergoing training arcs, struggling to succeed, and ultimately pushing themselves past their limits while harnessing the power of friendship, metaphorically of course, are also elements of sports manga. Sports manga also impact real-life trends, with Slam Dunk popularizing basketball in Japan, and many J&T volleyball players straight up citing Haikyuu as the reason they chose volleyball to begin with, and many other international athletes having named favorites from the show. Let's not forget the craze over figure skater Yuzuru Hanyu, which coincided with the airing of Yuri on Ice. Sports series are inspiring and have entertained generations of readers, but when it comes to the perception of sports manga, especially in English-speaking spheres, not all of them are regarded equally, even if they happen to be well received in Japan. I think it's kind of a shame that a lot of people tend to see sports series as inherently boring because they happen to be more mundane premise-wise compared to an action shonen. And I can kind of understand, but what I like about sports series is that they're a little bit more accessible, at least to me personally. Not that I can't relate to a character in a fantasy action shonen, but I feel like the struggles that are portrayed in sports manga are a lot easier to resonate with because the setting is more grounded. The moments where the characters push past obstacles tend to hit harder for me because I can see a real person experiencing these things, and a lot of their struggles are translatable to personal struggles that I've faced. Again, not that I don't relate to characters in more fantastical settings, but I feel like the emotional resonance is a bit harder to get with a series whose setting is a bit more detached from real life. For example, it's easy to see myself in Tanaka from Haikyuu, who sees himself as an average Joe compared to his peers. Obviously, this isn't a unique character trait, and many characters in action shonen also feel this way, but because I can understand the gap in skill between Tanaka and his peers clearly due to my understanding of volleyball as a sport, his struggles feel a lot closer to me than if he were in an action shonen where the abilities are within the realm of fantasy, and I kinda just have to take the author's word for it when a character sees themselves as average. The mundane in Haikyuu's case works in its favor when it comes to highlighting what a character lacks, what they aspire towards, and it communicates their feelings in a way that's easy for me to connect to as a reader. and this is actually a hallmark of the sports animanga genre. However, I find that most people think that series that have this sort of writing are the exception rather than the majority, and the reason for that may lie in a certain series which, while not horrible, definitely impacted the reputation of sports series as a whole for the English-speaking audience. When I was in middle school, there was one sports anime in particular that took the internet by storm. Interest quickly spawned following a 30-second promo video animated by Kyoto Animation, which dropped in 2013 during a commercial break for one of their other projects, Tamako Market. This 30-second video wasn't meant to be anything but a showcase of the animator's skill, but the clip went so viral that KyoAni actually went through with creating none other than Free Iwatobi Swim Club. This would be the anime that marked the sports anime boom of the early 2010s, at least as I remember it. Back then I was already pretty familiar with sports anime and manga as I was reading Slam Dunk and had watched Ofuri, but sports media hadn't really been that popular with my peers, so I was actually very surprised when people suddenly started getting super into sports, mostly due to Free, and later around the same time Haikyuu, Yabapara, Diano Ace, Kuroko no Basket. I'm sure there were more, but those are the ones I recall distinctly, at least a little before Yuri on Ice. Now, out of all of those mentioned that were especially popular on sites like Tumblr, I was really only super into Daya. I avoided Haikyuu because, again, volleyball wasn't really my sport and I wasn't into biking. When it came to Kuroko, I had almost a bitter aversion to it because, admittedly, I'm still like this, but when it comes to sports that I'm familiar with or have played myself, I tend to prefer when my sports series are more grounded or realistic, and also people said that Slam Dunk was ugly compared to UKNB, and I would not let that slide. Even though, admittedly, Inoue's early art is definitely dated, but come on! Anyway, when it came to the viral Free, I did give the anime a chance, but felt like it was a little too heavy on the slice of life aspect, so I ultimately dropped it. However, there was another reason why I wasn't super keen on the more popular series of the day, and that would have to be shipping culture. I think it's best to be upfront about this because while it wasn't a fair bias for me to have, it's why I wanted to talk about this to begin with. It's not a secret that a lot of the more popular sports anime have predominantly female fan bases, and not saying that shipping is reserved only for women or only girls ship characters in media, but shipping in these fandoms was commonplace. There's nothing wrong with shipping, and I just want to say that outright. I was not against the concept of shipping, but I think because of my experience with Free, which I felt was disappointing because I wanted more as far as the actual sports aspect, I was under the impression that series like Haikyuu were kind of in the same vein, where there was more of a slice of life vibe and the main pool was pretty boys. Because there's a difference between a sports series that focuses on the sports and a sports series where the characters just so happen to be athletes. If that's confusing, let me give examples with two of my favorite sports series. In Diano Ace, the primary focus is the main character's growth as a pitcher. The whole manga is built around Sawamura's baseball career and prominently centers the games as he aims to become his team's ace and compete in the Koshien tournament. Conversely, in a series like Ping Pong, the sport is used more like a backdrop for the character's personal development as people, with the ultimate goal for each character not necessarily tied to winning a big tournament or attaining a specific title. This isn't to say that either approach is better or worse, or that one is more of a sports manga than the other, but the vibes are definitely different, and depending on your personal taste, you might take to one more than the other. This is why I didn't particularly click with Free, because I felt like the sport didn't take enough of a front seat, and why I felt like I wouldn't click with Haikyuu. Don't get me wrong, I was and am still a huge proponent of Misawa from Diano Ace, and I even chose my table number for a recent event based off of the jersey numbers of my favorite ship in Slam Dunk, but as a teenager, I wasn't interested in media where I felt like the interest hinged mostly on hot anime boys, and hot anime boys that weren't even experiencing homoerotic iboisms as teammates because they were barely playing any sports. Obviously, as I eventually came to watch Haikyuu, I was super proven wrong about its vibe, but to deny that I was avoiding the series because I didn't think it had real substance would be a lie. And when I eventually did give the series a chance, it had me questioning why I, during my teenage years, frowned upon the heavy shipping culture surrounding it. It made me realize that there was a difference between the sports manga that were popular with men and sports manga that were popular with women, and this led to me wondering why, other than potentially art style, there was such a huge difference in taste when these stories could be enjoyed by everyone. And then, when I started my Diano Ace rewatch earlier this year, I encountered a comment which read something like, "This is a real sports anime, not that Haikyuu crap." It made me pause because I knew Haikyuu was a real sports anime, and that this sort of comment would only be made by someone who didn't watch the show or read the manga. So why say it at all? Why put Haikyuu down in this way? So I thought about it. I thought about my own preconceptions about the series and the fandom and why I was so stubborn about not watching it. Why I was convinced, without even giving it a chance, I wouldn't like it. I thought about the difference in Haikyuu fans compared to Slam Dunk or Dia fans, and then I realized, could it be possible that Haikyuu's reputation is what it is among other anime watchers because its fan base has a very active shipping community? And related to this, is it possible that most people who avoid the series only do so because of the predominantly female fan base? Do they think Haikyuu is only for girls? And if so, why the aggressive reaction to this? Surely the answer can't be as simple as misogyny, right? Well, obviously, this is all just based on my personal observation, but it is pretty telling that a series like Haikyuu, which is so beautifully written, gets easily dismissed purely because of something like shipping culture. The thing is, shipping is present in every fan base. It just so happens that Haikyuu has a lot of male characters and very few female characters. This means that most of the ships in Haikyuu and other sports manga will be gay pairings, and I think that people, particularly men, find that uncomfortable. If their vehement denial of ships like Sasunaru and recent gloating about the end of Gundam G-Quux are anything to go by. In an environment where the overwhelming majority of fans participate in shipping culture and where it's hard for people to slap an actually they're just good friends label on popular ships, I can see where some people might get annoyed and just not want to engage altogether. However, I just find it incredibly transparent that some people go out of their way to disparage sports anime that are popular with women without even giving them a fair shake or having any desire to do so. Granted, not a lot of my friends were super into the sports series that I like because of art style, see Ping Pong or Slam Dunk, but you don't really see women vehemently insulting series with grittier or less pretty art styles like you see the way people, predominantly men, go after sports anime that women like. While I myself was a proponent of shipping culture made me not want to watch this in my youth due to my own internalized misogyny, seeing that this perspective is still being pushed admittedly makes me kind of frustrated because it's just not fair. You don't have to like shipping. I'm not saying you should immediately run to watch a certain series after this or that you should write a 12-page apology to Haruichi Furudate, but I definitely feel like people should reflect on why they're so quick to assume a series is bad purely based on things like the fandom ships characters a lot, and why they feel the need to put down a series popular with women when talking about their own favorite series within the same genre. Women in fandom spaces already kind of have to prove that they belong there or that their opinions are worth respecting. Even women who have been longtime fans of anime and manga in general often get hit with a, "Oh, you like anime? Name 5 shonen series," and similar remarks. As someone who is very female presenting and whose taste veers more towards series that have mostly male fan bases, I've experienced a lot of this sort of attitude with guys that honestly gets really aggravating. If I enjoy a series that a man likes, I'm either not a real fan or only like it for shallow reasons like shipping. And I think it's really frustrating that women aren't allowed to engage with their favorite series without being criticized or likened to tourists or posers. Their favorite series are never as deep as the series that men like. Girls just don't get it the way men do. A girl doesn't have the smarts to know when a series is actually good. I really don't mean for all of this to come across as purely men bad, women good, because the main point concerns a base level of respect for other people, not making someone feel bad or lesser for enjoying something or engaging with a piece of media in a way that differs from how you would engage with it, but is otherwise harmless. The truth of the matter is that everyone has different tastes, and just because you personally don't like something doesn't mean that it's bad. It's just different and aimed towards an audience that isn't you. What I consider a good sports manga doesn't necessarily translate to another person, and I think it's good to focus more on what you enjoy than what you don't. Seriously, sometimes I see the way people talk about Haikyuu fans and it honestly vibes like going out in public and seeing someone using a fork instead of chopsticks to eat their ramen and making a huge deal out of it. Like, who cares? You're being weird by shaming someone for something that doesn't even directly affect you. Obviously, this is something that's important to me because I feel like fandom spaces in general have been kind of regressing as far as people making others feel cringe for behavior that's honestly not unusual for fandom spaces. Like, what was up with calling shipping rare pairs and making headcanons cringe? We've been doing this since forever. And I just feel like it's healthy to take a step back and question why something bothers us so much, and if there's really a need to go further than just shrugging your shoulders and saying, this one's not for me. As someone who grew up during a time where liking anime and manga at all was seen as weird, it makes me happy to see how the culture has grown overall, but it also makes me very aware of behavior that comes across as shaming or patronizing. You don't have to like someone else's favorite series, you're free to judge a work based off your own opinions, but if someone's just enjoying a work in their own corner, there's really no need to make them feel embarrassed over it. so I hope that people can consider others more carefully before diminishing works that clearly mean a lot to other people, even if they don't mean a lot to you personally. Anyway, that's my talk. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next video. By the way, here are my favorite sports series of all time. I'll shill Slam Dunk forever, but Real also changed my life, I think. I also think y'all should check out Harukaze Mound and Weekly Shonen Jump. The art is gorgeous, and I love the premise. It's a new series, so please support it so it doesn't get the axe. Please, 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 please.